Good morning, everyone. On behalf of everyone here at the CREST Network, my name is Bill Giannone, and I welcome you to this morning's webinar entitled Moving the Goalpost, How to Keep Going and Growing. You know, many times the expression moving the goalpost is a negative term. It relates to something that is unfair. You know, oh, I thought my target was X, and then all of a sudden I came into work and my boss changed my target to Y, and that's just not fair. Well, we're going to explain why not only is moving the goalpost something that your boss should be doing, or you as a boss should be doing, it's also something that we should all embrace because it's the only way for your company to keep going and growing. So let's get started. Congratulations, you reached your goal. Now what? This, believe it or not, is a major problem in most companies. Let's just talk about marketers for a second. If you tell your marketer, my goal for you is that I would need you to bring in 15 leads every month, and you work really hard and all your effort and energy is built upon giving them a goal of 15 leads a month. When they reach that 15 leads a month threshold, now what? They've achieved something that they're very happy about. They've achieved something that was an end goal that everybody was agreed upon as something that was set. The only thing that can happen from here is disappointment, because either they're going to stop working and obviously those leads are going to shrink. So it's going to be a short victory. Or we're going to decide that that 15 is now going to be 20 or 25, and that's going to create a negative sense of accomplishment. It's going to do the exact opposite of what we think it should happen. We need to make sure that we're thinking differently and we're okay with moving the goalposts. You are not done once you've succeeded in your goals. You're just getting started. Think about the guy in the background here pushing that rock uphill. And yet that hill never stops. That hill is the success and growth of your business. The second you stop pushing, the second that you stop growing and being successful. I know that's a daunting task and nobody likes to hear that. We all want to know, when am I going to be able to take it easy? Well, to be honest, in business, there's no such thing as taking it easy. In order to keep growing your business, you have to be growing it all the time. It's not enough to simply say to yourself, well, I want to get to $2 million, and then I'm going to be happy at $2 million. Believe it or not, the work that it takes to go from being a growth company to a stabilization company is greater than it is to continue growing. There's a momentum involved in growth, and we're going to talk about all of this, but there's a momentum involved in growth that is so different than the mindset of stabilization. And I'm here to tell you, in most companies, that when you go into stabilization mode, you're probably at the first stages of collapse. I truly believe that. I've seen it anecdotally throughout our industry. When guys say to themselves, oh, I'm just comfortable where I am, that's when everything changes within the company and you don't remain where you think you are or where you want to be. Look at it this way. You're not moving the goalposts. You're just setting new, higher, and better goals for everyone. That's the important thing to remember. You can't treat this negatively. You have to present it in a positive way. Think of them as steps on this growth process. You don't want to say to a marketer, I need you to be bringing in 40 leads a month. That's too daunting a task. In the same way that you don't want your child to be able to do complex mathematics when they're in first grade. You want them to do simple addition and subtraction. And they're going to progress to the point where when they're in high school or college, they're able to do the most difficult math there is. That's progression. That's walk before you run. I'm saying need to do the same thing within our business, whether you're the boss or whether you're just one of the workers and one of the team members. Think of your goals as being short-term and movable. The first question we always have to ask ourselves, no matter who we are in the process, is what are your goals? As an employee or as a team member, your goals should be, how can I maximize my value to the company so that my value is maximized for myself? Right? If you are a worker, the best way to increase your value and your worth is to do things for the company that are extremely valuable. So you need to set your goals or help share in the setting of your goals with your bosses in ways that will enhance your ability to show your value. You clearly don't want to go in there and just be a sheep and say, well, whatever you say is fine. Because what happens if your boss sets goals that are unattainable or that are outside of your scope of work or that just don't make sense? There has to be a two-way conversation. There has to be clarity in what you're being asked to do. You don't want to set yourself up for failure, and you certainly don't want to let your boss set you up for failure. We're going to talk about how to avoid that in the next couple of slides. But it's very important that as an employee or a team member, you need to understand what your personal goals are and how they can align with the company's goals for you. As an owner, you need to set your goals out very clearly. I'm going to give you 3 easy steps, but these 3 steps must be done. You need to think them out. You need to have clear, concise goals. You need to plan them. You need to have a process from getting from point A to point B. And you need to write those goals down. I've done entire webinars on the psychology of writing down your goals because they're just dreams. It's very difficult to put your goals into action if you don't write them down, because writing down your goal is the first part of planning them out. So think them out, plan them out, and then write them down. This is a very, very important process. I know it sounds kind of corny and very new agey, and I'm not that kind of a guy either. I'm a nuts and bolts numbers guy. But it is absolutely true that if you don't write your goals down, you can't fully commit to them, so you can't fully make them happen. They will just be a plan. I talked before about how to figure out if the plan or the goals make sense. There's something that's called smart logic when it comes to planning out your goals. You need to have 5 distinct attributes to each goal. And we're going to talk about them right now. This applies to bosses. This applies to workers. This applies to everybody. All your goals need to apply these 5 principles. They need to be specific. It's not enough to say, I want to be bigger. Oh, I want to take over Charlotte in 2 years. That's not a big enough, good enough, specific enough plan. You need to put specific numbers to it. I want my company to be 30% larger. I want my revenue to go up by 20%, my profit to go up by 30%. You need to be that specific. They need to be measurable. Your plans have to be measurable. What does that mean? You can't use things like in 08, 09, after the economy had crashed because of the housing crisis, and the Obama administration came in. This is not a political talking point. This is just a fact. The Obama administration came in and said, we've done a great job. We've created or saved 9 million jobs. Well, we knew how many jobs they created, but saved was the other part of the equation. They had created about 1.5 million jobs. So they were alleging that they had saved 7.5 million jobs. That is an unmeasurable number that they were using to make themselves look good, right? Both administrations, both parties do that all the time. You have to be able to measure it. It's not good enough to say, oh, I want to do better out in the field. What does that mean? I want my guys to perform better. What does that mean? How are we going to measure that? We will talk about ways to measure your guys' success in the field, but it has to be a measurable goal. You can't just throw out an arbitrary subjective comment. It has to be achievable. It would not be fair to hire a brand new marketer and say to them, okay, I'm going to give you 90 days and I want you to bring in 50 leads a month after 90 days. That would be a goal that's not achievable. It's also not realistic, which is the next one. Achievable and realistic kind of go hand in hand. They have to be goals that make sense. They have to be goals that don't set you and or the team member up for failure. So as the new employee, you need to understand that you should have some input into what's achievable and realistic. You might not be aware of what's achievable and realistic in the industry. That's why people like Dick and myself provide value to the owners, because we can give them good perspective on what is an achievable result. We have an RMS class coming up next week for certification for marketers. And in that class, I spend a lot of time talking to owners about achievable, realistic expectations of a marketer's timeframes. Most owners don't allow for a reasonable or achievable framework of time in what they want the marketer to do. So those are very important, and they kind of go hand in hand. Make sure that your goals are both achievable and realistic when you set them. I think in the first 6 months, it would be great if you could get yourself up to 10 leads a month in the first 6 months. That's wonderful. But knowing that we're going to have other goals, and we're going to discuss how to structure other goals. Okay, finally, the last letter T is timely. Let's make sure our goals that we're setting are timely to what's happening with our company now. Okay, if you don't do repairs right now, don't set a goal of going from $2 million to $10 million in 2 years, because you don't even have the bandwidth or the wherewithal to do something if it would include doing repairs on a mitigation job. That's what I mean about timely. Set your goals so that you're going to be able to do in the next 6 months basically everything that you want with the current staffing. Because it usually takes 6 months to bring on staffing before they can be part of the new change or growth process. The onboarding is 90 days, and then it's 90 days of out in the field to see any kind of results. So you're not going to be able to do a 6-month goal by saying, well, I'm going to bring on a bunch of people and that's how I'm going to do it. That's not timely. It's also not realistic. My idea would be any short-term goals that we're going to set, we want to be able to say, what can I do with the people I have here now? That's going to accomplish all of your SMART logic quotients. Let's make sure every time we set goals, we look at these 5 factors and determine whether or not our goals line up. If any one of these is missing, your goal is going to fail. Everybody's going to be worse off for it. And most importantly, your company is going to be worse off for it. We have to set different time frames and different goals sets based on different time frames. There are 2 different types of time frames I'm going to talk about. The first one I'm going to talk about is a much more structured, longer term time frame for company success, and it's called the 1-3-5. Just about every company on Wall Street that I've ever worked with, or I even knew about when I was working there, has a 1-3-5. They have 1-year goals, 3-year goals, and 5-year goals. That's how you structure your company for long-term, measurable, steady growth and success. Those aren't things that are very, very quick to change. Those aren't things that are what I would say instant gratification. They take a lot of work and they take a lot of grinding. So the 1-3-5 is really good for stable companies that want long, sustainable growth. There is another way of doing it, which is the 3-6-12-24. This is something for smaller companies who want to be more aggressive. You can set 4 goals for yourself. They're all different time frames, but you have 3, 6, 12, and 24 month goals. For instance, Dick and I use this all the time when we're trying to set the timetables for a new marketer. We always say the 3-month window should be the introduction window. Don't expect them to provide you with any leads whatsoever. The 6-month window should include getting a good group of A's together that are starting to give you business. The 12-month window should be by the time the first year is done, your employees should have paid for themselves and provided you with a nice steady stream of income, but they should know exactly who their A's and B's are, and they should have already started funneling out their C's. And finally, the 24-month goal is after the employee's first full year of employment, they should be $1 million producer. So you could see how I just did that in the 3, 6, 12, and 24 boxes, and I set different goals for different timeframes. I'm clearly not moving the goalpost because each time frame has its own specific goal. But this is a way to establish a model of expectation and a model of accountability that ties into your growth model. Because now if I know I just brought a marketer on, I know that in 2 years, I'm going to be guaranteed that extra $1 million of revenue. So how do I do the rest of my planning? Well, that's how I do it. I do it according to that model, and everything else in my company is designed the same way. I'm going to go back and show you a different way of looking at the 1, 3, 5, and maybe you'll understand it. This chart starts in the top left and works its way down and kind of winds through, and you'll see that. You want to start by drafting a 5-year plan. Your 5-year plan is your long-term vision for your company. So when you talk about designing a plan, we said write it down. I always start with, where do you want to be in 5 years? That's your pie in the sky. That's your vision. That's really easy. That's, well, I want to be a $10 million company, and you're a $1 million company now. Is that out of the realm of possibility? We're going to talk about that in a second. Then we're going to move to the 3-year plan. What's your medium goal? Maybe you say, okay, I want to be 5 million in 3 years. Okay. And right now you're $1 million company. That's fine. Now we move on to our short-term plan. In a year, I want to be a $2 million company. Is that something we can do as well? Well, guess what we do? We write all those down, and then we look at them and we say, is it realistic? See the blue box in the middle on the bottom? Is it realistic? If it's realistic, we could skip steps 5 and 6, but we always have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to assess, and then we have to revise the 3 and 5 year plans to make sure that the first year plan can fit into them. See what we're doing here, guys? We're step by step planning it out. We're not just saying it, we're planning it. It's not enough to just say it or dream it. You have to plan it. So that's what we're doing. We write down the 5, we write down the 3, we write down the 1. Then we say, is this really going to happen? And maybe we say, well, let's just take a look at the 3 and the 5. Maybe those really can happen. And then we can make adjustments to the 1 to make it more feasible. And then finally, we have to start executing the 1-year plan. While we're executing the 1-year plan, we're constantly revising the 3 and the 5-year plans. Right? We have to make sure that what's happening in reality is lining up with what our expectations are for the future. If not, we have to revise them, either revise them up if things are going better than expected, or revise them down if they're going a little weaker than expected. And then we always just repeat the cycle. We go right back and we start again. And as the year ends, it's no longer a 3 and a 5, it's a 2 and a 4. So we have to now create new 1, 3, 5s. We always want to be looking at 1, 3, 5s. Everybody understand that? Basically, this process never ends. However, if you do follow this 1, 3, 5 plan where you're constantly revising, you will grow. I guarantee it. It's absolutely locked in. It's baked in the cake, as they say, that if you're constantly planning and you're constantly looking at it and assessing it and revising and executing and revising again, I don't care how disappointing you are, you're always going to be growing. 2 things go into this, though. You have to be doing continuous planning. This little chart is 3 steps. We're going to start in the purple on the top right. Strategy formulation. Where do we want to go as an organization? That's no different than that 5-year plan. Okay. Strategy alignment at the bottom says, how do we get there? Okay. Where do we want to be? How do we get there? That's the planning. That's the, you don't just open the doors and let it go. And then the third part is the performance monitoring. Are we achieving the results we planned for? You constantly need to be managing your performance. You need to be assessing, and you have to be as honest as possible. This has to happen all the time. That third part is really the most important part. That's what's going to take most of the time. Where you want to go as an organization is something that happens once a quarter. How do we get there is something that happens fairly regularly, but it's only probably once a month where you're tweaking your systems, because that's the systems implementation. But are we achieving the performance monitoring and management? That is happening all the time, which takes us to our second piece, continuous performance management. Guys, I've used this expression for the last 3 years that Dick and I have been involved with the CREST network. It was actually the catchphrase of my former consulting company name, which was Restoration CEO. It's why we always say you have to be working on your business, not in your business. You need to be constantly assessing and managing your performance. You can't be doing that in the field. You'll only see one small part of your business if you're in the field. You need to constantly be discussing your goals. Start on the, basically at the 1 o'clock part of this semicircle and work your way clockwise. Periodic discussions on goals. You constantly need to be checking in and having conversations with everybody who's performing their work at every level. You need to be getting feedback on the process. What's going right? What's going wrong? More importantly, what's going wrong? Learning and skill development initiatives, you constantly need to be retraining. No matter how well people are doing things, you need to keep training to their skill sets. If you think everybody's perfect, start introducing new things in your company. Let them find more and better ways. You need to be doing performance improvement checks all the time. Quality control is very important. And finally, continuous recognition and appreciation. No matter how much things are changing and no matter how much you're constantly tweaking and looking for the bad things, we need to recognize and reward those good things on a regular basis. Part of your job in doing performance management is to recognize good. And it's to make sure that we know that we are in a position to reward when things are going well. We have to eliminate the I can't. If there's anybody in the company from you all the way on down who has doubts or trepidation about what you're doing, they're not a good team member. You don't need that doubting Thomas around. It's one thing to have a doubting Thomas in the room with you to kind of give you the things that might not be good, that might be a little off. Let's just make sure we understand one thing. If somebody's in your company and they are not performing the way you need them to perform because they don't believe in the mission, they don't believe in the goals, they don't belong in your company. So eliminate I can't from your company. Very, very important. Keep growing. I said before, keep going and keep growing. This has to be a mantra in your company. There's a TV show on one of those reality networks, and it's a reality TV show about real estate agents in New York City, and it's called $1 Million Listing, and it's kind of cheesy, and I watch it just for humor. But one of the guys there has built his real estate agency into a behemoth in New York City, and his catchphrase for his company is growing always in all ways. So he just believes in growth. And I think that's a pretty good mantra for all of us to have. If we're not growing, we're shrinking. And we have to constantly be doing that. That's the best way to keep your competition at bay, is to just keep growing. There are many, many, many ways to grow your company: acquisitions, mergers, things like that. I'm going to tell you about the 5 ways you can grow your company that are based on the 5 pieces of every company. There are 5 pieces to every restoration company. And if we look at those 5 pieces, I'm going to give you one little tip in each one of these 5 pieces that can help you grow your company every single day. Let's talk about these 5 pieces before we get specific: marketing, sales, production, invoicing, and administration. Okay, I would want to separate invoicing and call it finance, but for specific purposes here, we're going to call it invoicing. Marketing and sales in just about every other industry are the same. It's the same person who's out there introducing your company, who's also coming back with the contract for 1 million widgets, right? You introduce, you market, you eventually come back and you get a contract signed. So sales and marketing are very much linked. In our industry, they're not. Marketing's about introducing your company to people who can refer your business. The vast majority of the business that most restorations get comes from B2B marketing: plumbers, real estate agents, insurance agents, carpet cleaners, other businesses who will refer you because they're coming across water damage. Yes, we get internet leads directly from homeowners. Yes, every once in a while we'll get an Angie's List lead, those kinds of things. But by and large, we don't spend our time and effort marketing to the end user in our industry. So that's why marketing is separate from sales. In most companies, the marketer is not the guy going out getting the work authorization signed. So that's why we have them separate. Obviously, production in every company is standalone as a separate part of the company, producing the product, whether it's a good or a service. Production is its own entity. Invoicing is part of finance. I've had it separated here because it's a very important part and the one thing we can do to help ourselves. And then finally, administration, which is the catch-all for the office. Now that we've identified each of those 5 parts of your company, let's talk individually about each one of them, okay? We'll start with the marketing. Very simple. You can keep growing by constantly generating more leads. No matter what happens in your company, no matter how poor you close them, or no matter how small those leads are, if you can generate more leads every single month compared to the previous month, your company's going to grow. It's just that easy. You have to get more leads. Your company has to become a lead generation magnet. How do you do that? Well, my advice would be you give Dick Wagner a call and he can obviously coach you and your team into generating more leads. But there are many avenues. If any of you have taken the RMS course, you already know that there are many different ways to generate leads for your company. But you need to put a specific plan in action. It's not enough to just say, yeah, go out and do more leads. No. What are your marketers going to do differently to generate more leads? Where are you going to spend different dollars to generate more leads? Do you currently do SEO or pay-per-click? Do you currently pay plumber referrals? Do you currently market to other B2Bs? Those are questions you have to ask yourself. And if the answer to any of those is no, and you think that might be a way to generate more leads, you need to develop a plan for that. Like I said, everything has to have a plan. Make sure it's smart. Moving on to sales. Once those leads get generated, the best and simplest way to generate more sales is close more jobs. You've got a funnel. The salesman controls that funnel. It doesn't matter how much the marketing team pours into the top of that funnel. If the salesman's ability to close cannot expand, if the mouth of that funnel can't get larger, you're not going to be able to help out that marketing team. You want to do better? Close more jobs. What is it about your sales process that's keeping you from closing 75, 80, 85% of your leads? If you're not closing anywhere between 75 and 85% of your leads, that's a conversation that we need to have about analyzing what in your process is keeping that from happening. And then we need to come up with a solution, right? Fixing a process is analyzing it, understanding it, and then putting a plan of action in place to change it, to correct it. Like, corrections isn't just, oh, you stink, go do better. Garbage in, garbage out. We need good leads, but we also need to make sure that we have processes and people in place to close those leads. We need a great sales process. Production. This looks like a increased productivity. We need to work harder and we need to work smarter. You guys are aware that every single line item in Xactimate that deals with one of your crew doing a field task, either demolition, cleaning, setting equipment, things like that. Every single one of those line items has a rate of production implied into that line. If you don't know what that means, drop me an email, bill@thecrestnetwork.com. I will gladly explain to you exactly where to find that rate of productivity. But it's important for you to know this, because in order to increase productivity, you need to know how fast your guys are currently working and if they should be expected to be working faster. If your guys are only ripping out 80 square feet of drywall an hour, and the program says they should be ripping out 120 square feet of drywall an hour, well, your guys are just lazy. Your guys need to increase their productivity. You will make more money if they can increase their productivity. Okay. In line with that, the salesmen, when they go out there, they need to do a much better job of scoping as well. So closing more jobs is great, but they also need to scope so that when it comes to production, the amount of work that these guys are doing is absolutely at the maximum allowable amount, keeping in mind what the S500 standards are for our industry. I can't tell you how many times I run into companies that are doing the minimal amount to be compliant, as opposed to the maximum amount. They're not doing all the demo that is required. They're actually leaving jobs in worse shape than when they found them. They're not drying properly. They're not demoing properly. They're not doing great care for the client. They're doing what they need to do to justify submitting a $3,000 invoice instead of working their butts off and submitting a $6,000 invoice. Speaking of invoicing, we're going to talk about this. I guarantee you, most of you have the ability to increase your average invoice without changing anything else, other than taking a much harder, deeper look at how and what you're invoicing for. Look at how you're scoping your work. Look at how you're generating all of your reports, and then look at exactly what you're billing for. Better yet, try to look through and see, what are you leaving out? What are you possibly leaving out? If you're removing drywall, did you make sure you get the baseboard? Did you make sure that you got all of the pieces of trim? Sometimes baseboard is a 2-piece trim. Sometimes crown molding could be 2 or 3 pieces. Are you taking off for each individual piece? I know this sounds very minuscule. These are the kinds of things you have to make sure you're capturing. If you are removing drywall, and then when you're cleaning the floors, are you also cleaning the wall cavities? Remember, once you remove the drywall, you've got a wall cavity in there where you've got the studs. So you need to clean in there as well. A lot of people forget to put that on. These are the kinds of things I'm talking about. I could almost promise that 95% of you are not maximizing your invoice size. You need to understand that you need to maximize your invoice size. I want you to look at this chart. This chart is not very large. I didn't want it to be large because I don't want you to stress too much. But this is basically a chart that says on the vertical column, going from bottom to top, it says project size. So it goes from a small project all the way to a mega project. Okay. Then the complexity of the project is the horizontal. So that says complexity low, moderate, high, or extreme. I have the chart blacked out in the far corner because I don't think any of us should be doing mega extreme projects. At least nobody on this webinar. If you guys happen to be working for Belfour, fine, you can go after those, but we should stay away from those. I did put an oval, though, in the sweet spot, and I think the sweet spot is the corner, because what I'm going to tell you is if you go on a diagonal from the bottom left to the top right, that arrow that you would see there is where you would want to be. You want to be in the top right corner of every box. So that circle is where you want your invoice amounts to be. For instance, you could do a mega easy job, and there's different ways to bill it. You can bill it top right, which is the most expensive way, or you could bill it bottom left, which would be the cheapest way. If you're not confident in your abilities, you're going to bill it cheaply. So let's make sure that we always try to take the easier jobs, the jobs we could execute. So that's why the sweet spot is medium and moderate. That's the sweet spot. See where that dot is? That's where you want to be. You want to be able to bill in that spot, up in that part of the circle. Okay? Make sure you're billing for everything you're doing. My motto, we bill for everything we do and not a penny more, because then we can accept our full amount, not a penny less. You can grow that way. Finally, you need to manage better. In your administration, there are things you can do. You can control costs. You can purchase in bulk. You can utilize your staff better. And you could develop processes that will manage all of this. Who looks at your fuel purchases? Who tracks the mileage on the cars? Who tracks the maintenance on the vehicles? Who's keeping track of the expense accounts in the company? Great growth depends upon solid discipline in the office, right? If you're struggling and your expenses right now as a company are near 60% of your revenue, meaning if your office and your administrative expenses, your rent, your staff, your utilities, your insurances, if those are approaching 60% of the revenue of your company, you're spending too much. You need to make sure you're doing little steps. You know, one of the companies I work with started buying all of their supplies in bulk. Their plastic, their garbage bags, their filters. Instead of buying them once a month, they buy them once every 4 months, but they buy pallets of garbage bags and pallets of plastic. And they have enough warehouse space to be able to do that. But you know what they saved? They saved 3%. Doesn't sound like a lot. Sounds like very little. But you know what 3% was? It's not 3% of their overall cost, because they save like 30% by buying in bulk. The 3% they saved was 3% of their water revenue. Last year, their water revenue was $3.2 million. Just by buying in bulk, they saved themselves $90,000. That $90,000 went to pay for 2 additional staff in the office. So they didn't save money, but now they had much greater ability in the office to be properly staffed, which then allowed them this year to be on track for $4.5 million of revenue. That's what I mean about really, really good management, really good processes, and discipline. Each one of those places, each one of those 5, you could find a couple of points here and a couple of points there. And what do I always say? The expenses are usually the expenses. So whenever you're saving 1%, 2%, 3% in every one of these little spots, that's all profit. That all goes into your pockets as owners. So what is your plan? At this point, you should be asking yourself, hopefully your head is spinning and you're saying to yourself, I got to kick myself in the butt and I got to get on this plan. Well, what is your plan? Setting goals and following through. That's your plan. Set those goals. Hopefully you'll set some 1, 3, 5 goals. You'll write them down. You'll make sure that they're all smart. And then you'll follow through. You'll establish a plan. Following through includes your team members. Bring your team members in on that plan and let them help you with the plan for growth. Remember, nobody wants to work in a company that doesn't get bigger and better. Everybody wants to be part of a success story for their own reasons. We talked about this early on. If you're a worker, do you want to be with a company that's just coasting, or do you want to be with a company that has huge growth in their future? I know when I worked for companies on Wall Street, I really liked being with the companies that were expanding and growing, hungry companies, because I knew it was going to reflect better on me. I knew that when push came to shove, that was all I was going to care about, was how is it going to reflect on me? As an owner, I want everybody in my company to be worried about themselves, but I also want them to be worried about the company because that's what's going to help them and help me. And that's the win-win. When they're worried about themselves and the company, that's the win-win, guys. I want to thank you very, very much on behalf of Dick Wagner and everybody at the CREST Network. Thank you for sharing this time with me. And if there's any questions on this or anything else that you have regarding your business, reach out to me. I'm Bill at thecrestnetwork.com, Dick at thecrestnetwork.com as well. Just a heads up for you, we are currently on Spotify right now. We've got podcasts that get posted 3 or 4 times a week. Just go on to Spotify and check us out, the CREST Network. There's a lot of great, fresh, unique content on there. Most of our offerings are 15, 20 minutes where Dick and I are just kind of talking off the cuff on very interesting subjects. I just put a 4-part blog post up. I think the first 2 are up and the next 2 are going to be up this week. Something very interesting for you to be looking at. Anyway, lots of good things going on here at the CREST Network. On behalf of everyone, again, Bill Giannone, thank you so much for your time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.